You never expect the knife to come from the hand you've been holding for years. Haley wasn't just my coworker, she was family. We started together, dreamed together, and I thought we'd rise together. But when the spotlight came, she made sure I disappeared into the shadows. One rumor, one stolen idea. That's all it took to erase everything I'd built. She climbed over me without looking back. But life has a way of circling back, because now I'm the one calling the shots and she's the one waiting outside my office. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart, this story is for you. Hit the like button if you've felt that kind of hurt, and don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life tales of karma, betrayal, and justice. My name is Cynthia Rowe. I'm 40 years old, a senior team leader at a mid-sized advertising firm in Austin, Texas. Or at least, I used to be. For over a decade, I poured everything I had into that company. I wasn't flashy or loud like some of my colleagues. I didn't crave the spotlight. But I got results, steady, reliable, polished work that clients came back for again and again. I led with empathy. I coached the junior staff like a big sister, and I stayed late when others went home. Not because I had to, but because I cared. That's probably why people trusted me. And that's definitely why Haley gravitated toward me when she was hired 15 years ago. Haley was the opposite of me in every way: younger, bolder, louder, and effortlessly charming. She had this contagious laugh that filled the room and a confidence that turned heads in every meeting. But behind all that shine, there were cracks. She struggled to manage client expectations. Her campaigns often lacked structure, and she had a hard time taking feedback without feeling attacked. So I took her under my wing. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I believed in women supporting women. I believed we all had a place at the table. We clicked almost instantly. Within weeks, we were grabbing lunch together, texting after hours, venting about tricky clients and annoying deadlines. She called me her work wife. I called her my little sister. Over the years, our friendship grew past the walls of the office. She came to my baby shower when I was pregnant with my son Daniel. I helped her move into her first apartment. When her mother got sick, I covered her projects without hesitation so she could fly home. We leaned on each other like family. Looking back now, I wonder if I missed the signs. There were little things, like how she always asked for help brainstorming, but somehow only ever pitched my ideas, or how she'd take credit for a joint project in meetings if I wasn't there to clarify. I brushed it off, told myself she was just learning, finding her voice, that none of it was intentional. After all, she was my friend. Besides, I never cared much about climbing the ladder. I was content leading my team, mentoring others, making sure we delivered excellent work. I didn't need a corner office to feel fulfilled. But Haley, she wanted more. She wanted the spotlight, the title, the money, the recognition, and she wanted it fast. Still, I kept supporting her. When she applied for a team lead position last year, I even wrote her a glowing recommendation detailing how much she'd grown and how I truly believed she was ready. I meant every word. So when I found out she got the promotion, the one I didn't even know she was gunning for, I was happy for her. Or at least, I tried to be. Even when her name was suddenly on the door, I used to walk through for years. Even when she stopped texting back, as often too busy with strategy meetings and cross-departmental visions, I chalked it up to change. Growth. until things started shifting. Suddenly, upper management was questioning my leadership. I was being pulled into awkward meetings about performance issues I'd never had in 15 years. They were subtle at first comments about slower turnarounds or lack of innovation. It didn't make sense. My metrics were solid. My team respected me. Clients asked for me by name. Then one afternoon, my manager sat me down and said something I'll never forget. "We're concerned that you're becoming a bottleneck, Cynthia. We've heard from others that you're resistant to new ideas, that your work pace isn't keeping up." Others I asked, stunned. "Who's saying that?" He didn't answer. But he didn't have to, because later that week, I found out from a junior associate, one who adored me and didn't realize the weight of what she was revealing, that Haley had been saying I was holding the team back, that I was set in my ways, that she was cleaning up messes left behind. It hit me like a brick wall. I wanted to believe there had been a mistake, a miscommunication, anything but what it was. But in my gut, I knew. Haley had outgrown the mentorship, outgrown the friendship, and now she wanted what I had. She just didn't want me in the way. The shift was slow at first, like a storm creeping in behind blue skies. Meetings that used to feel collaborative suddenly felt tense. Haley stopped asking for my input like she used to. When I offered suggestions, she'd nod vaguely or brush them aside with a tight smile and say, "Let's circle back to that later." We never did. One day, I noticed she was holding a pitch deck that looked eerily familiar. It was one of my drafts, an early concept I'd been refining for weeks, but hadn't submitted yet. I'd mentioned it to her in passing, just as friends do over lunch. She'd asked a few questions, nodded along. And now, here she was, presenting it like it had come straight from her head. At first, I thought it had to be coincidence. Maybe we were just thinking along the same lines. But the layout, the wording, it was too exact. She'd made a few tweaks, dressed it up with buzzwords, but the bones were mine. After her presentation, the client was ecstatic. Our supervisor was impressed. She got a standing ovation in the conference room. I stood in the back, clapping politely, my face calm, but my stomach twisted into knots. I confronted her the next day gently. "Hey, that campaign you presented, it looked a lot like something I shared with you a few weeks ago. Did you mean to build off that?" She laughed like I'd told a silly joke. "Oh, Sin, we brainstorm all the time. Ideas are meant to evolve." I thought you'd be flattered. Flattered. It was the first time I felt the sting. But it wouldn't be the last. Over the next few months, I began to notice a pattern. Haley was constantly positioning herself in rooms I wasn't in, getting invited to upper-level briefings, landing high-profile projects I never even heard about. She'd stopped looping me in, stopped sharing anything that wasn't public knowledge. But somehow, she always had access to my work, sometimes through assistants, sometimes through shared folders that mysteriously got copied and repackaged before I had the chance to present. I started documenting everything: email timestamps, internal messages, even meeting notes. Still, I didn't want to believe she was doing this on purpose. I thought maybe it's just office politics. Maybe she's ambitious, and I'm just not keeping up. But then came the performance review. I walked into the room, expecting the usual notes about continued excellence, constructive feedback, maybe a conversation about training newer staff. Instead, I was blindsided. There have been concerns my department head began avoiding eye contact. Multiple team members have reported delays under your leadership, and some say your resistance to new methods is slowing progress. I felt like the floor dropped beneath me. What delays? I asked. My team hit every benchmark this quarter. He shifted in his chair. It's also about perception, Cynthia. And frankly, Haley's team has been operating more efficiently. We're considering streamlining some leadership roles. Streamlining? They were demoting me. I sat in silence, heart pounding. So, who reported these concerns? He hesitated, then answered with the coldest, most corporate phrase I'd ever heard. I can't disclose individual sources, but we trust our team's feedback. I knew. I knew who it was. Later that evening, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. I walked by Haley's glass-walled corner office, the one that used to belong to my mentor, the one I never asked for, but quietly dreamed of someday earning. She was inside laughing on the phone, twirling her pen between her fingers. Her desk was immaculate, and on the shelf behind her was a framed photo of the two of us from 5 years ago, smiling, side by side. I wondered if she ever looked at it anymore, or if it was just a relic, a trophy of how far she'd come. A week later, it was official. My title was changed from senior team leader to project advisor. I no longer had a team. I was given minor accounts, busy work, made to feel like a guest in the company I'd helped build. My name was left off a major campaign I'd laid the groundwork for. In meetings, people stopped looking at me when decisions were made. And Haley, she rose faster than ever. Featured in a company newsletter, given speaking slots at conferences, praised for innovative thinking and team leadership. It was like I'd never existed. The hardest part wasn't the demotion. It wasn't the loss of influence or recognition. It was losing her. The friend who'd seen me through my divorce, who cried with me in the hospital waiting room when Daniel had his appendix removed, who used to say, I don't know what I'd do without you, Sin. Now I knew what she'd do. She'd step over me, smile while she did it. I didn't quit. I wanted to more times than I could count. I'd stare at my resignation letter, saved in drafts, my finger hovering over the mouse. But every time I got close, something stopped me. Pride, stubbornness, maybe just fear of starting over at 40, or maybe I wasn't ready to give Haley the satisfaction. Still, that didn't make it any easier to show up. I'd walk into that building every morning with a stone in my chest. People who used to greet me with warmth now offered polite nods or avoided eye contact altogether. Some of them had probably believed the things Haley said about me. Some of them had just decided not to get involved. I couldn't really blame them. The higher you climb, the more invisible the casualties become. I was one of them now. The worst part, the work didn't even feel like mine anymore. I was handed forgettable accounts, made to attend meetings where my voice wasn't asked for, much less heard. I was slowly being erased, but kept just present enough to not cause legal trouble. Haley's signature was on everything now. Her fingerprints on every project I used to nurture, like a garden, and yet she still found ways to twist the knife. There was the team happy hour she forgot to invite me to, the conference she accidentally left me off the registration list for, and one afternoon I'll never forget, she walked past my desk and her designer heels paused, then said with mock concern, "You okay, Sin? You've just been so quiet lately." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my mug through the glass wall of her office and ask her how she could live with herself. But all I did was nod and force a smile. I'm fine. Fine. That word became my mask, my shield, my prison. My teenage son Daniel noticed before anyone else did. "Mom," he said one night over reheated takeout, "you look tired. Like, soul tired." He was 16, thoughtful beyond his years. I wanted to tell him the truth, but how do you explain office betrayal and professional humiliation to a boy whose world was still homework and basketball? So I just said, "Work's been rough, honey. I'll be okay." But I wasn't okay, and the longer it went on, the deeper I sank. Sleep became fragmented. Food lost its taste. I'd stare at old emails between Haley and me, trying to pinpoint the moment everything changed. The dinner invites, the shared jokes, the late-night venting sessions, all of it felt like memories from another lifetime one, where I still believed in loyalty. There were days I'd park in the company garage and sit in the car for 30 minutes, hands frozen on the steering wheel, debating whether to turn the key or just drive away. Some days I did drive, just not home. I'd end up in some quiet corner of Austin, a park bench by Lady Bird Lake, an empty booth at a diner off the freeway, staring into space, wondering if I had failed. Had I been too trusting? Too soft? Was I naive to think that mentorship and kindness would be enough to protect me? It all came to a head. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I'd been assigned a minor pitch for a local boutique, the kind of job interns used to handle. I worked on it anyway, poured in the last drops of my energy just to feel something. When I handed it in, my current manager glanced at it and said, "Actually, Haley already submitted a concept for this one." Of course she had. And once again, she'd beaten me to it, taken what little I had left. I went to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and cried. Not quiet, pretty tears, but the kind of sobbing that racks your ribs and shakes your shoulders. I cried for the years I'd given, for the respect I'd lost, for the friend who no longer saw me as anything but a rung on a ladder she'd already climbed. I stayed in there for nearly 30 minutes. No one came looking. No one asked if I was okay. When I finally emerged, my eyes puffy and my blouse wrinkled, I decided I was done. Not just with the company, with the pain, with pretending. I was going to resign the next morning. But fate had other plans. As I gathered my things that night, my phone buzzed with an email from a client I hadn't heard from in years. Her name was Claire Donovan, founder of a sustainable skincare brand I'd helped launch early in my career. We'd built a great rapport back then, and even though our contract ended years ago, she still sent the occasional holiday card. The subject line read, "Thinking of you. Let's catch up curious." I opened it. "Hi, Cynthia. I was in town for a supplier meeting and happened to stop by your old office to say hello. Imagine my surprise when I learned you'd been moved to a different role. That didn't sit right with me, knowing how much of my brand's success came from your brilliance. Let me buy you lunch next week. I have a feeling the world hasn't seen the last of you yet. Claire." I stared at the screen stunned, and then, for the first time in months, I smiled. Because someone remembered. Someone still saw me. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to rise again. I met Claire for lunch the following Tuesday. It was a warm spring day, but I still wore a blazer, one of the few pieces of clothing that made me feel like I still had authority, even if it was just a memory now. Claire was already at the cafe, her usual radiant self. She stood up when she saw me and pulled me into a warm hug. It wasn't forced. It wasn't performative. It felt safe. "You look great, Cynthia," she said, gesturing for me to sit. I almost laughed. "You're kind, but I feel like a cracked shell right now." She tilted her head. "Even cracked shells can hold pearls. That's why I wanted to see you. I know something happened at your company, and I don't need the details unless you want to share them. But I do know this: what they've done to you doesn't erase who you are." That line hit something deep in me. For the next hour, I let myself talk. I told her about Haley, about the theft of ideas, the lies, the slow unraveling of my reputation. I talked about the loneliness, the exhaustion, the hopelessness. Claire listened, never interrupting, never judging. When I finally stopped, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I don't know how someone could do that to you," she said quietly, "but I believe you'll come out of it stronger. If you ever want a fresh start, I know a few places where your talent would be treasured." That night, I didn't cry. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. Not hope exactly, but a flicker, a quiet spark. Over the next few days, I started to plan. Not impulsively, carefully, strategically. First, I met with HR. Not to complain about Haley, but to ask about internal transfers. A position had just opened up in the Seattle branch, small team, low profile, but decent growth potential. It was exactly what I needed. Far away from the drama. A chance to breathe. When I submitted the transfer request, Haley sent me a one-line Slack message. "Moving to Seattle. Didn't expect that from you." I stared at the message for a while before typing back. "Didn't expect a lot of things, did we?" No emoji, no warmth, just the truth. 2 weeks later, I was gone. Seattle was a different world. Rainy, yes, but calm. The office there was modest but filled with hungry, creative minds who didn't care about office politics or who sat at what table. They cared about doing good work, and I did exactly that. I started small, taking on brands others had overlooked. I listened, built trust, and created campaigns that felt authentic. Clients started requesting me by name. Within a year, we doubled our client base. I earned my team's loyalty, not with fear or manipulation, but with mentorship, the very thing Haley once took from me. And I grew, not just professionally, personally. I took yoga. I hiked the Cascades. I started journaling, reconnecting with my son in deeper ways. Daniel visited over spring break and said, "You seem lighter." "Mom, like, you're back." He was right. I was coming back. And then 2 years to the month after I left Austin, I got a call from corporate. The voice on the other end belonged to Martin Hale, one of the senior VPs I'd worked with before. He didn't waste time with small talk. "We need someone to take over national strategy," he said. "You're the strongest leader we've got right now. You've turned the Seattle office into one of the most profitable branches in the company. The board's impressed." I was stunned. "Are you offering me a promotion?" He chuckled. "We're offering you a reclamation. You earned this years ago. We just didn't see it." I thought of Haley in that moment. Her voice, her betrayal, her assent, and now, her ceiling. I returned to the Austin headquarters 3 weeks later, but this time not as a team lead, not as a ghost of who I used to be, This time, I walked in as Director of National Strategy. There was a new office, a glass corner suite, a nameplate with Cynthia R. Blake etched in silver. But more than that, there was a shift in how people looked at me. The same faces that once looked away now stood to greet me, polite, respectful, some even nervous. But the one I was most curious to see, Haley. She walked into our first executive team meeting 5 minutes late, flustered. When she saw me at the head of the table, her eyes widened just slightly. She recovered quickly, forcing a bright smile. "Cynthia, welcome back. So glad to see you here," she said, sliding into her seat like nothing had happened. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch just long enough. Then I looked directly at her and said, "Thank you, Haley. I hope we can work together professionally now that the roles are clearer." Her smile faltered, just for a moment. The meeting began, and for the first time in years, I felt whole again. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I had survived and risen. I didn't come back to punish Haley. I came back to lead. But sometimes those two things are one and the same. In my first week back as Director of National Strategy, I held one-on-one meetings with every department head. Some were enthusiastic, some were wary. And then there was Haley. She now led the Austin regional team, my old position. She walked into my office with a clipboard and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've prepared an overview of my department's performance." She began placing a folder on my desk. I didn't look at it. "Sit." "Haley," I said, motioning to the chair across from me. She sat crossing her legs carefully. "I know this might be awkward considering our history, but I want you to know I'm committed to working under your leadership." I tilted my head. Interesting phrasing, working under. "I remember a time you didn't see me that way." She blinked, but didn't flinch. "That was a long time ago." 2 years, I corrected. "Not that long." Silence hung heavy between us. Then I opened the folder, flipped through it, and closed it again. "Your team's performance is solid," I said, "but your employee retention rate is the lowest in the region." Any insight into why? She straightened. "Some turnover is natural in a high-pressure environment. We have high standards." I nodded slowly. "Or maybe your people don't feel safe. I'll be doing anonymous interviews with your staff next week. I like to hear from the ground." Her jaw tightened. That was the beginning. In the weeks that followed, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sabotage. I didn't spread rumors. I led. But I watched. And I listened. I spoke with designers, copywriters, assistants, the very people who rarely got invited to the big table. What I heard in Haley's department disturbed me. Fear-based management, credit hoarding, late-night emails demanding instant turnarounds. She takes our ideas and presents them as hers. One junior strategist said, eyes darting nervously. "We're scared to speak up." Sound familiar? I compiled notes, not as ammunition, but as accountability. And then came the opportunity. A major client, Blue Horizon Hotels, was unhappy with their latest campaign. Haley had overseen the rollout. It was sleek, but soulless. The client wanted storytelling emotion, something that felt human. They reached out to me directly asking if I could take a second look. I did, quietly. I brought in a small team from the Seattle branch, people I trusted. In a week, we had a new pitch rooted in family, travel, memory-making connection. We even incorporated real guest stories. When we presented it to Blue Horizon, their VP stood up, shook my hand, and said, "This is what we've been waiting for." The account stayed with us, but Haley's team was pulled off it. She found out the next day. She stormed into my office. "You took my client behind my back." I stayed seated calm. "I saved your client from walking," I replied. Her voice rose. "You're trying to make me look incompetent." I met her gaze. "I don't need to try." She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She turned and walked out, her heels sharp against the tile. I didn't smile. Not then, not in front of her. But inside, I felt the first wave of justice, not petty revenge, but earned reversal. By the end of the quarter, the anonymous interviews were complete. HR sent me a report. It was damning. 70% of her team cited low morale, high stress, fear of retribution. Multiple complaints had gone unaddressed for months. I called a formal review. Haley was furious but professional, for now. During the review, she tried to spin the narrative. "We've delivered strong numbers. That speaks louder than feelings." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Haley, leadership isn't just about numbers. It's about people, and your people are burning out." There was a silence. The other directors in the room, many of whom once admired her, said nothing in her defense. By the end of the meeting, we made a decision. Haley would be reassigned to a support role in the Northeast region. A lateral move technically, but everyone knew what it meant. She wasn't being fired, she was being sidelined. That Friday, she came to my office for the last time. She didn't knock, just walked in. "So that's it," she said. "You're exiling me." I folded my hands calmly. "You're being given a chance to reflect. Rebuild, like I was." She laughed bitterly. "You wanted this all along, didn't you?" I stood. "No," I said. "What I wanted was a friend who didn't betray me. But since I didn't get that, I'll settle for peace." She stared at me for a long moment. Then finally, she nodded. "You've changed." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "No, Haley. I just stopped letting people like you define me." Her departure was quiet. No grand farewell, no tears. Just a desk cleared on a Monday morning. A new name on a team chart. And me still standing still leading. There were moments I thought about reaching out, about offering forgiveness. But I remembered the months I spent doubting myself. The late nights, the panic attacks, the way she smiled while stepping on my back. And I chose not to forget, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes it just means no longer needing revenge. Because karma, when done right, doesn't scream. It just arrives quiet and undeniable, wearing heels that click down polished floors, and holding your old job bay title. It was the first leadership summit since my return. All the regional heads were gathered in the main conference room. I stood at the front, poised calm, scanning the room. My eyes landed on her. Haley. She sat 3 rows back, no longer in her power suit, no longer flanked by eager assistants. Just another name on the org chart now. She tried to look unreadable, but her hands fidgeted slightly in her lap. "Before we begin," I said to the room, "I want to talk about something more important than numbers." The room fell silent. Trust. I took a breath. In this business, we rely on each other. Our ideas, our integrity, they're our currency. And once broken trust is hard to rebuild, but not impossible. I didn't look at her directly, but I knew she was listening. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to lead. And that means setting a tone of accountability and growth for all of us. I wrapped the meeting efficiently. The team applauded cautiously. At first, then stronger. Change had come. Real, steady, undeniable. As everyone filtered out, Haley lingered. She walked up, hesitated, then said, "You meant what you said. About trust being rebuilt." I nodded. In some cases, her voice dropped. And us? I tilted my head. Friends forgive. Bosses, remember? She blinked, then gave a sad smile. Fair enough. I turned and walked away, heels steady, shoulders light. I didn't need to destroy her. I had become someone stronger than she ever imagined. Because revenge doesn't always come wrapped in fire. Sometimes it walks back into the room, graceful and quiet, wearing a nameplate that says director.